Hello, everyone. In this monologue, we're going to discuss Zionism, and we're going to talk about why I am a Zionist. I'm going to enumerate some of the objections to Zionism and my rebuttals against those objections. So, first of all, what is Zionism? Zionism has a number of premises. One is that Jewish people are entitled to political sovereignty, meaning they're entitled to have their own state. Secondly, that it should be a homeland for Jews, meaning that all Jews throughout the world ideally would consider it their home. So they don't necessarily have to live there, they don't have to relocate there, but as a last resort, if something should happen in their sojourned places of living where they're sojourning, well, because again, according to Zionism, the Zion is the homeland. So if there's an American Jew, then of course you're entitled to live in America, but it's not necessarily permanent. You're not necessarily secure there because you don't have self-rule. So another objection of Zionism is to provide for a Jewish homeland. This is your home. This is where you belong. So should a second Holocaust happen, you know where to go. That's the second objective. The third objective of Zionism is that this homeland and this political state should be in Zion. So it's not sufficient, it's not okay to make this in Europe. It's not okay to make it in Africa or in America or anywhere else. It's got to be in the land that historically was Jewish. So the land of Israel that was historically controlled by the Davidic kingdom, later the Hasmoneans, etc., until the Jews were exiled there by the Romans in 70 AD. That's the land where we want to reestablish a Jewish sovereign state. Okay, so first of all, this theory, this ideology, should not at all be controversial in modern times, because in modern times, most of the prevailing belief is that people are entitled to self-determination. So any people that has a distinct set of beliefs, a culture, an ethnicity, they should have, and they feel like they deserve to be self-ruled because of those distinctions, because of those features. We, meaning Western civilization nowadays, believes that, we believe in nationalism. We believe that they should not be subject to any foreign rule. They should have their own rule. And so the only element of it that is maybe controversial is the fact that it is in Zion as opposed to Europe. So I'll get back to this in a moment. But suffice it to say, for the moment, that a lot of the people who object to Zionism, they don't at all distinguish between the two. It's not like, oh, I believe in Jewish self-rule, but just not in Zion, right? Not in the land of Israel, maybe somewhere else. So, this kind of indicts them, right? Because if you're not capable of opposing Zion without opposing Jewish self-rule, then your whole ideology is refuted here, because in that case, you believe everyone else is entitled to have political sovereignty, but the Jews don't. So that's not a tenable position to have. Okay, I'll get back to this in a moment. But for now, let's discuss the objections to Zionism, historically speaking. So first of all, the two major objections is one from the right and one from the left. I'm going to start with the one from the left because that actually emerged chronologically first. The objection from the left, of course, comes from the Reform movement. So the Reform movement, it started in Germany in the mid-18th century, picked up steam in it really became an established, powerful movement in the 19th century, early 19th century. And the Reform ideal was that, hey, we Jews, we got to get out of the ghettos. I mean, this is an enlightened world. This is a liberated/emancipated world. This is a post-Napoleonic world. That's when it really picked up steam after Napoleon, meaning the early 19th century. And so this is an emancipated world. We have civil rights. We're just like anyone else in our country. So if you're a French Jew, hey, we're just like other French people. If you're a German Jew, we're like other Germans. Of course, we have our unique persuasion. So we practice Judaism. We go to a temple and they go to a church or whatever. But that's not significant. Okay, this is an important tenet here of Reform Judaism. The religion is not significant. It's not significant enough to change me as a person. So, the birthplace of reform was German, so I'm going to talk as if I'm a German here. A German Jew in the mid-19th century would have said, hey, I'm a Jewish German, meaning I'm a German first, and for most intents and purposes, I'm a German. I dress like a German, I speak the German language, I believe in German values, I go to German institutions, I go to a German school, my children enroll in German schools, etc., etc. Yes, I go to Jewish temple on the Sabbath. Not a big deal. In America, we have thousands of organizations that have special interests that they promote. They don't seek independence. They don't seek political sovereignty. Why? Because they're Americans, right? That's their identification. Yeah, they promote a certain belief, a certain view, but that doesn't make them a different people, and that doesn't necessarily impel them to seek political independence. So this is a well understood concept, and that's what the German that's what the German Jews advocated at the time. So that's the first objection. The second objection comes from the right, meaning Haredi Judaism. So according to Haredi Judaism, just to give you a brief recap what that means, what the definition of Haredi Judaism is, it's not just that we want to maintain and preserve tradition at all costs, but we seek separatism from everyone else. So the principle here is that we need to, in order to preserve our traditions and our religion, we need to separate ourselves from everyone else, from the culture at large, and from other Jews who are more acculturated or assimilated than we are. So a Haredi Jew, for example, they dress traditionally, very, very important. It's not just what you do. You got to dress differently. You got to speak a traditional language that is distinctive from the host culture. Okay, you want to do things that are traditional, not merely for the sake of preserving your religion, but also for the sake of distinguishing yourself from your countrymen, and so on. So that is Haredi Judaism. Now, the Haredi opposition to Zionism was that, so this is best explicated and propounded by Rabbi Joel Teitelbaum. He was, of course, the major frontrunner in this camp. And he argued that, he made several arguments. One is that in the Talmud there is a passage where God abjured the Jewish people in 3 oaths, and 2 of which were that they would not ascend to the land of Israel en masse. Shelo ya'alu b'choma. They should not make an aliyah in mass. So, which means an individual is allowed to make that decision to make that trip from Europe or wherever else in exile they are to return to the land of Israel. But as a group, en masse, it is prohibited. Another of the 3 oaths was that shelo yimredu be'umos, they should not rebel against the nations. So the Haredi argument is, as propounded by Rabbi Teitelbaum, is that seeking to establish your own state is by definition a rebellion against the nations, because you're taking political sovereignty away from someone else who else controls that land before you assume control. Okay, so they don't want to give it up, so you are rebelling against them by establishing a land. Of course, as it turned out, there was enormous opposition to the establishment of the State of Israel by the people around them, namely the Arabs. And so, of course, there is, in fact, not only a theoretical rebellion, but an actual conflict and that is happening because of that desire to have political sovereignty and their own state. So that is the Haredi objection. And then lastly, there is a third objection that is, it's kind of a 2-part objection. And that is it's mainly an Arab objection, but it's really a leftist objection as well. So that's why I'm saying it has several parts to it. So here the objection isn't necessarily on Jewish sovereignty and on Jewish statehood. The objection here is in particular to the geographical place that the Jews have chosen, namely the land of Israel / Palestine / Zion. So the argument goes here that this is not their land. it doesn't belong to the Jews. It belongs to the Arabs slash Muslims that have lived there for many centuries. So according to this argument, yes, sure, are Jews entitled to their own land, to their own political sovereignty? Of course. But in Europe, okay, somewhere else. Don't come here, make a, who knows how many miles it is, what is it, 500 miles, whatever. Don't make this long trip and come here and take over our land and kick us out or whatever. And so that's the Arab argument against it. And the other part of it, I said it has two parts. The other part of here is, and this is what you'll hear a lot from the left, which allies itself with the Arab view on this. But that argument is that colonialism. Have you heard of that? So according to this argument, the implication here is, they don't necessarily say it explicitly, but the implication here is that the Jews came to the land of Israel not just to literally, occupy it and live there, but also to exploit. Kedi, go upstairs. Not just to literally live there, but also to exploit the land. Okay, so you're also occupying the land. I'm sorry, you're also exploiting the land as a colonial power. That's the implication. They don't necessarily, they're not specific about it, but that's the idea here. And I'll get to this, of course, in my refutation. You'll hear more about this. So let's go back to all three. Number one. So the first objection is from the left, from the Reform Judaism. So it so happens that that the objection from Reform Judaism was in fact dropped subsequently. Yes, it is true that Reform Jews objected to it at the time, but as time progressed, and as we go into, for example, the early 20th century, okay, there's a lot of Reform Jews in America that are starting to realize slowly but steadily that Zionism is not only here to stay, but it represents what Judaism is. So it's not just a persuasion, but it's also a signifier of who we are. So if I consider myself a Jew, even though I'm very much respectful and accepting of American nationality, I'm talking about an American Jew at this point. So if I consider myself a Jew, then I can't just say, well, there's no point of having statehood at all. Okay, because the state is a symbol of my persuasion. So even if I'm not going to live there, I still want to support it, and I want to support my co-religionists of being able to go there and establish their state. That's kind of the idea that the left has subsequently established. I'm talking about left. I'm talking about the Jewish left, meaning the Reform movement. So there's a lot of events that prompted this evolution of this idea. The Dreyfus trial was an important one. In fact, that is what gave rise to Zionism to begin with. Okay, look it up. I don't want to go into details, but that happened in France, and that was during World War I, right? No, sorry. That was the late 19th century, of course. Late 19th century. And then, of course, World War II. The World War II is a major, major event, of course. In it, many, many Jews died, millions of Jews, 6 million Jews, whatever the exact number is, doesn't matter. The point is, it was a major, major trauma, not just for the Jews, but for the entire world. Once the evidence came out, it was just shocking that such a thing could happen in the 20th century. Okay, we thought we were evolved, we were enlightened, we were good people, and it turns out that one of the best nations on earth, one of the most enlightened and most advanced and sophisticated nations, stooped to such a low degree in morality that they could do such a thing as killing so many Jews for no reason at all. And so in response to that, Jews realized that yes, these things could still happen, and even Jews who lived in other countries that were not persecuted, such as Jews in America, they realized that yes, it is important for us to have a homeland, to have political sovereignty, and they were enthusiastically supportive of the Jewish state following World War II. Okay, so bottom line is that the classical reform objection to Zionism no longer has any legs to stand on. And again, the main reason here is that even if we believe that under ideal circumstances we can be full-fledged members of our respective host countries, it's still possible for our host countries to reject us and to persecute us and possibly even kill us because we have our Jewish identity. And therefore, at a very minimum, we should have a homeland and political sovereignty. If not, us wanting to actually relocate there. Okay? At the very minimum, we should at least have that recourse of going there in case, things become bad. Okay? So that's it. That settles the first objection. Second objection, coming from the right, from Kedi Judaism. Here's the thing. The three oaths, they're not halacha. Okay? It's not in Shulchan Aruch. It was never taken, historically speaking, I'm talking about centuries ago, it was never taken seriously. It was part of the Agada. And I should also add that the three oaths, some of them are not quite clear exactly what they mean. For example, there was a phrase, Shelo yitchaku es haketz, that is sometimes erroneously worded as yirchaku with a reish instead of a dalet. So the first one means they should not postpone / push away the end, the redemption, and the other one means that they should not distance it. Presumably that means that you should not feel that, that's far, far away, I can't relate to that, doesn't matter to me. So we don't know exactly what these things mean, bottom line. And shelo yalo b'choma is also a difficult expression. I don't know exactly what it means. It's not very obvious what exactly the parameters of that prohibition are. We don't know who wrote the three oaths, and we don't know how seriously they were taken historically, etc., etc. So bottom line is that we can't really base an entire Haredi movement on these three oaths. Another objection from the left was, which I didn't mention earlier, from the right, from the Jewish right, from the Teitelbaum camp was, it's called Hischabrus l'Rishonim, the association with the wicked. So the argument was that since the major exponents of, the early exponents of Zionism were, in fact, atheists, or at a very minimum, they were openly non-observant, they were openly defiant of traditional Jewish law. Therefore, if I am supportive of that ideology, I'm basically going hand in hand and I'm associated with this wicked person, which is prohibited. And this, of course, is a valid argument per se. However, a lot of it no longer has that stink to it because it so happens that modern Zionism, meaning if you go to the modern state of Israel, a lot of the people are religious. Frankly speaking, if you look at the religious parties nowadays, they constitute a lot more a percentage of the Israeli Knesset than they did a long time ago. And far more people are traditional and observant and all that than they were in the past. Like the entire Shas party, it didn't exist, right? And it turns out, in fact, with our hindsight 2020 vision, that the state of Israel had a major role to play in the preservation of Jewish tradition, Jewish practice, etc. And so when you talk about, we're associating with the wicked, really? Are they that wicked that they are starting a movement to create a Jewish state that would promote the Jewish religion? Again, this is indisputable, incontrovertible nowadays, that the fact that the state of Israel has served as a platform, as a supportive role for the Jewish religion, Jewish traditions, etc. And so it's a difficult argument to make, and it seems artificial. It doesn't seem very ingenuous to say that they are wicked, any more than, for example, a Jew having a partner in America, a traditional Jew having a partner, a business partner, someone who's not perfectly observant, right? I'm having a business partnership. What? Am I associating with a wicked person because they are not perfectly religious? I mean, of course not, right? So I don't think Teitelbaum would have objected to that, right? And so here, I'm going to the state of Israel, and I'm benefiting from political Zionism, but yes, I can still be a religious Jew, and I'm not necessarily participating in the wickedness of the person who is not religious and not observant, right? I can be observant. He can be non-observant. We're both in this together. We both support Zionism. We both support Jewish traditions and the Judaism in general. He has his level of observance. I have mine. Of course, you can consider him wicked. I consider him wicked, quote unquote, right? But at the same time, this wouldn't fall into the category of his chaburs l'Rishonim in the sense that it would be, frowned upon traditionally. So like I said, the fact that as it turned out, the Jewish state has been a boon for the Jewish religion and traditionalism kind of repudiates the Teitelbaum argument here. Like I said, it removed the sting of it. The Teitelbaum argument doesn't have strong support anymore now that we see what the Jewish state has done to Judaism. So let's go to the last objection, which is the Arab objection and the leftist objection. So let's talk about the Arab objection. The Arab objection is that this is our land. This is Arabic land. For centuries, not only the land of Israel, but millions and millions of acres all around it have been ruled by Arabs. Sometimes it was non-Arab regimes, but there was always Muslim. So of course the Ottoman Turks controlled it before the British Mandate took over. But it's all Arab. It's all Muslim. Every single country around Israel, including all the way in North Africa is also all Muslim. But of course, Arabia, the Middle East, it's all Muslim, it's all Arab for the most part, except for, of course, the Turks and the Iranians. They're not Arab, but so the argument here is you just don't belong here. Okay, what are you coming here and stirring up trouble? You don't belong here. You're surrounded by Islam and by Arabs. So why, go back to, we're very sympathetic to you. We want you to have a state, but not here. Go somewhere else. Okay, go somewhere else where there isn't any Arabs/Muslims. The problem with this argument is that geography really is far less important and far less salient as a consideration as it appears. Just because I, meaning a piece of land that I occupy, just because I am surrounded by people of a different religion doesn't mean that I am infringing on their rights in any way. Okay, they still have their own political sovereignty, their own independence, their own, it doesn't affect them at all. So yes, it is true that Israel is the only state, the only land in the entire region. I'm talking about macro speaking here, like an enormous, like a bird's eye view of the entire Middle East and North Africa and Arabia. So just because they are the only non-Muslim land doesn't mean that they're creating trouble, that they're disrupting something here. There's no disruption. Now, regarding the fact that the land doesn't belong to them, it's a very weak argument, The Jews have a very strong connection, historically speaking. Of course, it goes back a long time, right? But there were also many Jews there throughout the Middle Ages, just like there were Arabs/Muslims living there throughout the Middle Ages, following the 7th century. And also, modern day Arabs are not necessarily that much stronger connected to the land as modern Jews. Okay, remember, there were many Jews living in Palestine for many centuries. Okay? Many Jews started coming up long before Zionism. They started making aliyah. Safat, Tiberia, those places were Kabbalistic strongholds long before Zionism. Also, many Palestinians have multiplied in the last 50, 60 years, and they're not necessarily that much connected to the land. And so the point I'm making here is that, lastly, I should also add that the early Zionists, I put this in quotes here because really all they did was essentially emigrate from Europe to the land of Israel and start settlements there. But the early Zionists, they did not use any violence at all. In fact, no one ever used violence to take control of land. All they did was come up and buy up land that was more or less unused, because Palestine at the time was a very undeveloped area, and so a lot of the land it didn't have much value. It wasn't very fertile. This was a pre-industrial state of being, so there was no industry. There was a lot of the land was kind of semi-arid. It was not very what is the word? You couldn't. It was not suitable for agriculture that much, unless you used modern methods of irrigation. And so the point of it, the point being here is that it wasn't very utilized, the land, and so the Jews had a connection to it. They wanted it, but the Arabs in the area not so much. And this is historically true. This is a fact. This is not, this is not my theory. This is a fact, a historical fact, that the early Zionists who made the Aliyah to Israel, who emigrated to the land of Israel, they could buy land for cheap simply because it was just not being used. And this is important to point out. They bought the land. They paid for it. This was not stolen. They did not use arms to get it. They bought the land and they paid for it. This is how Tel Aviv started. This is how Rishon LeZion started. And this is how West Jerusalem started. Okay, West Jerusalem, which is, where most of the Jews live, they didn't steal it. It was undeveloped land. They bought Mea Sha'arim. How did that settlement start? They bought land. A rich patron, whatever his name is, I forgot his name. Was it Rothschild? I don't know. Whatever it is, somebody, bought up the land. They built a bunch of apartments, and Jews, lived in it. So the point that I'm making here is that the notion that it's not their land is a very weak notion. Again, we have to go back. We have to look at it. The only fair way to look at it is that in 1948, you have Jews, you have Arabs. The Jews want to have their own state. The Arabs want to have their own state. You can't infuse this argument, this land doesn't belong to you. This is just a very weak argument. Again, historically speaking, the Jews have just as strong a historical connection as the Arabs do. And on top of that, the Jews did not steal the land any more than the Arabs stole the land. Okay? Again, they bought it up, legitimately. They paid for it. And all we have is a question of where the political sovereignty should be. In other words, where the lines of the new states should be. Any reasonable, rational, fair person would say that, hey, these are distinct people. They're living in the land of Israel. And so the only reasonable thing is to divide it into two states. So the question is where the borders should be drawn. The fact that the Arabs refused to allow the Jews to have their own state is a huge indictment. And that's the original sin when it comes to the Arab-Israeli conflict, is that they never wanted to have a Jewish state. So that's essentially that. Now, the left has its own twist on this objection to the Jewish state. So to them, it's not merely that the land doesn't belong to you, that you stole it, which is, again, not true, as I just pointed out. But it's not just that. To the left, it's a power struggle here. The left sees everything. This is a Marxist view that applies to all society, all economies, and all civilizations. They see as humanity as divided between the haves and the have-nots, the powerful and the powerless, the oppressor versus the oppressed. And to them, of course, the original Marxist view is, hey, we have the bourgeoisie and we have the proletariat, right? The people who create capital and exploit everyone else. And then we have the workers who are actually productive and making things. And so according to Marxism, everyone deserves to share equally. So likewise, with the modern left, they don't apply it to the economy anymore because that's kind of refuted, because we know that communism failed. So now they apply it to everything else. They apply it to power in general. So whenever you have two groups, one of which is rich and powerful and successful, and the other one is not, they always instinctively, without any critique, without any thinking, without any debate, like it can't be debated even, they automatically side with the oppressed. Hey, they don't have. Why don't they have? Somebody is taking something away from them, right? The person who is successful, how and why are you successful? You must be taking something from someone, legitimately. That's how it works. I always say to myself, if the Jews were suddenly become, a basket case, if the Jews / Israelis were to become a basket case, suddenly you could actually realistically imagine that the left would start siding with them, right? Imagine there's a Hamas state in the Middle East, and they're like, they're systematically oppressing the Jews, right? Maybe. I think it's very, very possible that the left would start siding with the Jews. I mean, that's essentially your redemption. Your only redemption is becoming a powerless person. But it just doesn't happen. If somebody is industrial, and ambitious and good and responsible, then they're going to be successful. And with success comes money, it comes prestige, and it comes power. So the left, of course, has a very twisted and perverse position on this. But like I said, the left also sees it as colonialist / exploitative. This has no basis in reality. It's a complete myth. This is part of their ideology of oppressor versus oppressed. Like, hey, you came from Europe, therefore you're a colonialist. This is not colonialism. So the Jews did not come there to exploit the local population. The Palestinians, there were no Palestinians back then, put in a quote, but the local Arabs living there, they were not oppressed. Obviously, the Jews did not have a state to oppress anyone with. They lived first under the Turks, who oppressed both of them, by the way. Both the Jews and the Arabs sought to free themselves of the yoke of the Turks. But anyway, so there was no exploitation involved there. They did not colonize the land in the classical sense, in the traditional sense of the word, like the Europeans, for example, came to Africa, and they built plants there, and they recruited the local population to work there, to work on the plantations, etc. And as was done in America, right? In America, they brought people here to work and to produce wealth and income to the motherland, namely England. So this was not the case in the land of Israel. There was no colonization in that sense. The Jews that went there had no connection with Europe. They did not export the wealth to Europe. And they did not exploit the local population in producing that wealth. In fact, on the contrary, they actually raised the standard of living to all around them, even non-Jews, Arabs, Muslims, whatever, whoever lived there, Bedouins, all of them had experienced a rise in their standard of living because of the Jewish industry and their initiative that they took in terms of irrigating the land, building farms, building whatever else they did in the early years. I don't know exactly what type of industry was done. I mean, most of it was, of course, agricultural in the early years, but later there was other ventures that the Israeli state engaged in, and once again, this wealth diffused over the entire area, not just for the Jews, but non-Jewish Israelis, namely Arab/Muslim Israelis, also benefited from that. And even to this day, Arab Israelis have a better standard of living than Arabs in other land. Okay, so again, what I'm trying to point out here is that this was not a colonialist/exploitative entity at all. It never was. And anyone who uses this term colonialist is either they're completely ignorant of what the term historically means and what it implies, or they're just being plain dumb and mean, because like I said, it has no basis in reality. So of course the entire leftist worldview on this is of course hokum. It has no hands and it has no legs and feet, and it has no hands and legs and whatever. It has nothing to stand on. But thank you so much for watching. It's been a nice 34 minutes, and if you enjoyed this, then I am happy to have given you this presentation, and enjoy your day. Bye-bye.